I could hardly believe my eyes. My son sat on the living room sofa, gasping softly, and the oxygen tank that normally stood beside him was gone. Just 2 minutes earlier, a phone call had sent my blood pressure skyrocketing. The president of our homeowners association, a woman named Elaine, had apparently walked onto our property, declared the tank a safety hazard, and confiscated it. A note was taped to our front door with a handwritten message: violation of HOA guidelines. Removed from premises. My 14-year-old son, Jordan, suffers from chronic respiratory insufficiency. That tank isn't optional, it's essential. I couldn't fathom how anyone in their right mind would justify removing a disabled child's life-saving equipment over some petty neighborhood rule. Still in my regular clothes, having just returned from an errand, I was overwhelmed with fury. But Elaine had made a serious miscalculation. What she didn't know was that I serve as the local fire chief. I handle emergencies of all kinds, witness true tragedy regularly, and possess both the training and authority to challenge such reckless behavior. Elaine had chosen the wrong parent to target. I tried to stay composed as I knelt by Jordan. He was struggling to breathe, trying to blink back tears. I reassured him that I'd get the tank back immediately. He nodded, trusting me completely, though I could see the panic shimmering in his eyes. I told him we'd use the backup portable tank I kept in my truck, but it wouldn't last through the night if his symptoms worsened. This wasn't just a bureaucratic issue, it was a crisis. I ran outside to grab the portable unit, the summer heat bearing down like a weight. I found it quickly, tested the gauge, and confirmed it was full. Inside, I hooked Jordan up, explaining that the flow rate was lower but it would help until I retrieved the main tank. Relief briefly flickered across his face as the oxygen began to stabilize him. I clenched my jaw. If I hadn't had that spare tank, Elaine's actions might have sent Jordan to the emergency room. That was not something I could let slide. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number on the note. After 4 rings, a sharp voice answered, Elaine speaking. May I ask who's calling? I introduced myself, identifying myself as Jordan's father and the resident at the address in question. She responded with a clipped explanation that the HOA had safety guidelines and the tank had been a fire risk. I fought back a growl. Did she think I, a firefighter by trade, would improperly store oxygen? I didn't reveal my job yet. Instead, I asked how she had the audacity to remove medical equipment from private property without permission. She claimed local code violations and brushed off my concern with bureaucratic jargon. I calmly corrected her. There was no such ordinance forbidding medical oxygen in a residential area. Furthermore, she had no legal authority to remove it. She said the HOA board had granted her authority and I could contest it at the next meeting. Then she warned me about fines for violating community guidelines. Still keeping my voice even, I told her Jordan relied on that tank to live. She sighed as though I were being dramatic and told me I could retrieve the tank from the HOA storage shed after paying a fee. If not, it would be destroyed within 48 hours. My hand trembled with rage. I told her I'd be there in 10 minutes. Then I hung up on her mid-sentence. Jordan looked at me anxiously. I told him I'd bring the tank back, then went upstairs. If Elaine wanted to see me as an uninformed neighbor, she was about to meet Fire Chief Marcus Avery. I pulled my formal fire department uniform from the closet. It wasn't my everyday gear but the polished version used for public events, complete with badges and rank stripes. I straightened the collar, checked my reflection, and confirmed I looked every bit the professional authority figure she didn't expect. After kissing Jordan's forehead and telling him to rest, I got in my truck and drove to the HOA office. Bakewood Greens, despite its name, had always felt more about appearances than actual care. I parked outside the modest beige building and walked straight in. The receptionist blinked at me in surprise. I need to see Elaine, I said. She pointed nervously toward a door marked conference room. I stepped inside. Elaine looked up from a stack of papers, her mouth dropping slightly as she took in my uniform. You must be the father, she said, regaining her composure. That's correct. Fire Chief Marcus Avery. A flicker of alarm crossed her face. She tried to assert that HOA rules applied to everyone. I cut her off. This isn't about rules. It's about you taking life-saving medical equipment without cause or authority. She doubled down, saying the tank was a fire hazard. I folded my arms and let her dig herself deeper. When she paused, I told her about my training, my certifications, and how her actions violated medical privacy and endangered a child. Elaine insisted I pay the fee and sign a liability waiver before she'd release the tank. I told her if she didn't hand it over immediately, I'd be contacting the police and pressing charges for theft and endangerment. Her face turned red, but she finally grabbed a keyring and led me to the shed. Inside, Jordan's oxygen tank leaned precariously among boxes of confiscated garden gnomes and unapproved patio lights. I inspected it carefully. A scratch along the side suggested it had been mishandled. I lifted it easily and turned to Elaine. She muttered something about HOA Clause 14, subsection 9. I told her no internal rule overrode the Americans with Disabilities Act or state law. She tried to argue, but I was done listening. Back home, I hooked Jordan up to the main tank. He sighed in relief and color returned to his face. I ruffled his hair and promised him everything was settled. But it wasn't. A week later, I received a formal letter from the HOA accusing me of endangerment and demanding a $200 monthly compliance fee or face eviction. It was signed by Elaine. I wrote a detailed response citing ADA protections, fair housing regulations, and fire codes. I demanded an emergency board meeting and threatened legal action. A few tense days passed before they responded with a hearing date. When the meeting arrived, I wore my uniform again and left Jordan with a neighbor. The room was packed with residents, some curious, some supportive. Elaine sat flanked by 4 board members. The president, a man named Raymond, opened the session. Elaine launched into a prepared speech about safety, painting me as a threat. When she finished, I stood and calmly introduced myself. I explained my credentials, my experience, and the critical nature of Jordan's oxygen tank. I cited every relevant law and guideline, then described how Elaine had trespassed and taken medical equipment without consent. The audience murmured. One board member, a woman named Nancy, asked Elaine why she hadn't consulted the board. Elaine fumbled an answer. Raymond asked the HOA's legal advisor, who admitted the HOA could be liable for discrimination. I sealed my case by showing the original confiscation note threatening to destroy the tank. That tipped the scales. The board retreated to deliberate. After 20 minutes, they returned with a verdict. No fines, no fees, full reinstatement of the tank, and a new policy protecting medical devices. Elaine stared daggers but stayed silent. I thanked the board and quietly left. Days later, HOA policy updates went out to all residents. Nancy even visited to apologize, hoping this would be a turning point. It was. Jordan regained his peace of mind. Other neighbors, like Javier, reached out for advice. Elaine, meanwhile, faded from leadership and eventually moved away. The day I saw the moving truck in front of her house, she avoided my eyes. I offered no words. That silence spoke volumes. Jordan still teases me about the day I wore the uniform to teach the HOA a lesson. He's right. It did. And now, no one at Bakewood Greens will ever mistake vital medical care for a violation again. That's the real victory. For Jordan, and for anyone who refuses to be intimidated when the stakes are breath and life itself.